interesting thing here, we're gonna see Dragapult, King Gambit, Sneasler once again. Now, it is worth noting there are a couple differences here across the board. First off, the Rillaboom does have access to knockoff, which is something you don't commonly see on Rillabooms as much. So maybe being able to knock off the Eviolite in a mirror situation, and also being able to knock off any other items that you might potentially want to keep as well too. I think a really big thing to note about this mirror in particular is that it is Stellar Sneasler, so it is not Ghost. It's not going to be able to Terra Ghost out of fake outs, which will change how they interact a little bit.
Yeah, but we have seen that Terra Stellar Sneasler, can be just as useful, has been doing a lot of damage in the past matches as well. So, both terrors definitely, like everything else, have their ups and downs. And Shimon, yeah, opting to go for the Stellar here. But the King Gambit actually doesn't have the black glasses this time. It has the safety goggles. So I have to say here on stream that, Simon, I am very disappointed in you. But yeah, otherwise, aside from the Rillaboom, pretty standard 6. And yeah, the Dragapult here being the odd one out because Simon's opponent, Pierre, playing the same 5, but instead of the Dragapult, the Volcarona.
Yeah, I mean, a really big thing here as well to note is that the other Sneasler is also Stellar. So again, there's not going to be any advantages with the fake outs. And one thing I also want to point out too is that both Rillabooms do have, or not both Rillabooms, both Primarinas do have access to Terra Poison. So unlike in the previous set where Terra Seal was an option for the Primarinas, now Terra Poison giving you a bit more of a way to play against Sneasler, right? And also against Rillaboom. You can Terra Poison defensively against the opposing Sneasler, the opposing Rillaboom, maybe leverage it a bit more in the matchup. And the biggest difference here, of course, is the Volcarona, right? Volcarona being able to get up those Quiver Dances, pressure the opposing team. It's pretty threatening, honestly, if it's able to get in the right situation. And it does have Terra Fairy, so if it finds itself in front of that Dragapult in King Gambit after the Sneasler is gone, it can Terra Fairy to put itself in a more advantageous situation.
Yeah, and I'm also actually curious to see if with the Electabuzz, because I know a lot of people like to play like very tanky Electabuzz. Personally, I've always opted for like a speedier set because sometimes, that speed tie can matter if one of your Electabuzz is taunted and cannot get that follow me or the helping hand off, can also help in these mirror matches. But yeah, this King Gambit, unlike Simon's, actually does have the black glasses as far as I'm aware, and the Volcarona is running that safety goggles, but there is no Amoonguss here in this match, so that item is not really gonna matter.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I gotta say, I think Black Glasses has like a bit more aura. You know what I mean? You look at you look at both King Gambits, you're like, man, Safety Goggles is like all right, but Black Glasses is cooler, right? It's just a cooler sounding item. But yeah, Black Glasses obviously beyond that is just gonna be able to do so much damage, right? Like the damage output is it doesn't seem like it'd be that much, right? Because it's just a 1.2 boost on Dark type moves. But with King Gambit, the Terra Dark, the Black Glasses, it just does so much damage. And I do think that if Pierre is able to get his King Gambit set up in the right position, it could put on so much more pressure than the opposing King Gambit.
Yeah, King Gambit has, like, personally for me, been my main C Pokemon since it's been released, and I can confirm those black glasses, they definitely make a difference in a lot of matchups. Gonna be interesting to see, if we can showcase that in this best of 3. And I believe game 1 is ready. So we are gonna hop into that in just a moment. And we are gonna be watching from Simon's perspective. And Pierre, his opponent, is gonna be leading the Primarina Electabuzz, going up against Primarina and Dragapult.
I feel like in this circumstance, right, your Dragapult is probably not in the situation it wants to be. You do have the option of going for Phantom Force potentially to get around a potential incoming Moonblast, but you're a little bit scared, right? I mean, there is redirection here. You have a Primarina in front of you as well. If there's maybe even a Protect plus a Moonblast, that could be a pretty scary turn. I do think both Primarinas are very comfortable set on the field here, go for an attack, but I think the Dragapult might want to switch out.
And it is going to go for that U-turn, get a little bit of damage on the Primarina, is going to switch right back out, and Swan gets a free switch in here this turn. Nah, cannot bring the Dragapult back in there, Simon. Sorry about that, but you probably don't want to in this case. Electabuzz coming in here, so we do have a mirror on the field right now, as the Electabuzz for Pierre is going to go for the E, but Primarina is going to avoid that, so dodging that super effective damage and the speed drop. but Electabuzz will take that drop as the Moonblast goes into what was the Dragapult, is the Electabuzz now, takes it, okay. Not sure if it's gonna live another one, probably not, and Moonblast here barely misses the KO on Pierre's Primarina.
I mean, I think if you're on Simone's side, you probably are feeling a bit better about this, right? Because now you can go for a Follow Me and a Hyper Voice. You exert so much pressure. The Electro Web means that you didn't take extra chip on your Primarina. So I do feel like there is a little bit of an advantage there. From Pierre's side, maybe it does allow you to get your Kingambit in sooner. And maybe even if you were trying to call an Electro Web, you could try to switch in your Kingambit. But likely it's just going to be a Hyper Voice coming out here. I do feel like off of turn 1, Simone did get a little bit of a better turn here. But we're going to see Protect come out, actually.
Yeah, Protect here, honestly, also fair in my opinion. Another Electroweb coming up from the Electabuzz on Pierre's side. And this Primarina, yeah, is going to get another Moonblast.
Oh, knocks out Buzz!
It's going to go down. It does take out the Electabuzz, but it is also going to go down to its own life orb. So maybe, you know, Simon here deciding that, okay, I'm going to lose my Electabuzz, but I'm also getting rid of the Primarina. And in this mirror match, you know, especially if you have the Dragapult, that is an important knockdown as well.
Absolutely. I mean, getting rid of the Primarina is like great value, especially because you're utilizing the Dragapult at this point now in a board state where there isn't really a Pokemon now that can take the hit, at least for free, right? Obviously, Kingambit doesn't really mind Dragon Darts too much, but you do have a Primarina next to it, so you are outputting a decent amount of damage. It is also worth noting that the Primarina on Simone's side seems to be trained pretty offensively and even maybe a little bit of speed. So it does kind of show that like the Primarina on the other side is definitely also really fast and offensive, potentially meaning it's going to be taking more from hits maybe later on in the set as well. And here you have a couple of options. You have that Outrage pressure to do a bunch of damage. You have Primarina being able to put out pressure with Life Orb. However, it's still scary when you're in front of a Kingambit, right? Like Swords Dance is always scary, and it does have Black Glasses, so it is doing quite a bit of damage.
It's always scary. Yeah, with the Black Glasses especially. Up in and yeah, I mean, Swords Dances, you know, can be hazed away by the Primarina. So, you know, if you're Pierre here, maybe you just go for Kowtow Cleave and get some, you know, maybe even knock out the Dragapult before it can attack. Because, you know, the Dragon Darts, as long as Kingambit is not that Terra Dark yet, you know, it does resist those. And we are going to see a Terra here. Probably going to be that Dragapult, yeah. So loses that Ghost type, does not want to just go down to a Sucker Punch here. Which, you know, fair enough. And these Dragon Darts, you know, could do a little more damage now. We are also going to see a Terra for Pierre. Is it going to be that Kingambit? It is going to be that Kingambit here. Terra Ghost Electabuzz probably wouldn't have had much value at this point. And now I'm curious to see, are we going to see a Sucker Punch?
Yeah. I mean, Sucker Punch here, if it does manage to get the knockout, could be pretty significant. Also, potentially maybe being able to go for a Kowtow Cleave here, just to guarantee the knockout on the Dragapult. We are seeing the Outrage come out. This might be able to knock that Electabuzz, depending on how it's trained. It's going into the Electabuzz and knocks it out, and that means that Moonblast can go straight in the Kingambit here, which, if it was clicked, just might knock it out.
Oh, this could be a knockout here for Simon as well. It is a double knockout here for Simon. That is a huge turn right there. Crazy that Electabuzz just went down through the Outrage, but that is the power of Choice Band Terra Dragapult there for you. And also the power of Primarina. You know, that is of course the downside to losing your Steel type from Kingambit, is that you are suddenly weak to those Moonblasts. And now Pierre, you know, having lost both of those Pokemon, is not in a great spot.
Yeah, I mean, a really good thing here, too, that Simone was able to do was he was able to pressure that Dragapult damage, and there was no way to stop it, right? Also, too, the Terra Dark may be looking good at the time, right? You're like, okay, I can knock out the opposing Dragapult, like, it's fine, I'll get a Kowtow Cleave down. But when the Electabuzz just gets removed from the field like that, you just made yourself weak to Moonblast, and you just instantly go down, right? So I think Pierre definitely has to go back to the drawing board here. Even though you have Sneasler, it is a situation in which there's just too many resources on Simone's side to really like fall behind in this game, in my opinion.
Yeah, I would agree with you there. Even though, you know, the Sneasler does have the Focus Sash, so will be able to hang on for one turn. At this point, I don't think there's a way for it to come back all on its own. So at this point, I think Pierre can already start, you know, thinking about how he wants to adjust in game 2, and, you know, maybe just turns like, you know, that last turn with the double knockout. Just, you know, you cannot you cannot let that happen. And maybe he was unaware of how well or how unwell the Electabuzz would take that outrage there. Maybe he was expecting it to hang on and redirect the Moonblast as well. But yeah, Sneasler here just gonna go for a fake out, but at this point, not gonna really matter.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, formalities, right? You're definitely probably just taking some extra time to maybe think through the turn. Fake out buys you an extra second. As well, too, I feel like Simon, honestly, you could just use the Dragapult again in the next game. So maybe this is kind of falling a bit more on Pierre to figure out some adjustments. But from this position, right, you just double attack. You're able to get strong damage out. Even if the Dragapult got confused, you just switch it out and then you're able to just kind of attack again, right? So this is definitely a really interesting situation, though, right? Because both the Electabuzz from Pierre's side was kind of just throwing out Electrowebs like haphazardly, I want to say, right? Like, how did King Gambit come in there at all, right? And maybe from from the other side too, like you could definitely try and catch a turn like that. It could have been really significant, right? So maybe that's something to keep in mind for the future games as well.
Yeah, I'm definitely also interested to see just if we're gonna see lead adjustments, or maybe Pierre thinks that his game plan, in theory was fine, but maybe 1 or 2 turns could have just played out differently. One last outrage here from this Dragapult is gonna take out this Sneasler, and Simon is gonna take this first game. And yeah, I mean, we've talked about the adjustments that Pierre can make in that second game. Of course, both players are playing very similar teams, but there is that difference in Simon having that Volcarona, or Simon not having the Volcarona, having the Dragapult, and Pierre having the Volcarona. Because the Dragapult can just deal heavy damage right away. The Volcarona needs some time to set up those correct support and really get going.
Yeah, I mean, a big thing here too, right, is going to be, does the Volcarona come to the game? Because if the Volcarona is opted to bring to the game, right, like the way the game played out, right, at least especially how Simon ended up positioning his board, it was very much a Dragapult focused game plan, right? I'm getting the Dragapult in, I'm able to go for damage with outrage, and then I'm able to kind of clean up with the Sneasler in the back. But if Volcarona is able to get set up, it could potentially be really threatening into that game plan, right? Of course, Volcarona doesn't really have any great options to touch Dragapult specifically with like Heat Wave or Giga Drain, right? But if you are able to get up enough Quiver Dances, you're going to be doing a decent amount of damage. Maybe if you catch a switch, maybe if you do enough damage, and Heat Wave can pressure the entire team if in the right position. So I'd be interested to see if Volcarona comes to the game. Maybe also leveraging King Gambit earlier could also be strong here. So I'm kind of interested to see, because I could definitely see like Electroweb and Kowtow Cleave being like a really strong turn 1 play coming out from Pierre.
Right, especially since, sometimes these Volcarona carry the cover cloak, so then you couldn't lower its speed with Electroweb. In this case, it has the safety goggles, so also for Simon that could be an option as well. What both players, of course, need to be careful of with the Electroweb is that a King Gambit could just suddenly switch in, and you can give it a Defiant boost. So definitely something you have to keep in mind. I'd say I think game 2 is ready, so let's hop into that and see how both of these players adjust. Because even though that first game did go very well for Simon, he does need to respect the possible adjustments that Pierre can make here.
We're going to see Sneasler in the lead here with Primarina against a Sneasler and King Gambit. I'm getting flashbacks to our third set now. We're gonna see a very common lead we see led in these mirrors, and notably the Dragapult was not brought, so maybe expecting an adjustment to something that can deal with Dragapult a bit better. Primarina and Sneasler are quite an offensive lead here. Maybe you have a bit of an advantage because you can pressure a Hyper Voice with the Terra Poison. Also, Fake Out being a really threatening option here. Maybe if Fake Out goes into Sneasler and a Hyper Voice, it could be really scary, even a close combat and a Hyper Voice. And we're gonna have to see really how Simon can react here to maybe reposition or try and get enough pressure off with this King Gambit. Although it is in a really awkward situation, I'd say.
We have seen a lot of Sneaslers today, but I don't think we've seen any Dire Claw sleeps yet, if I remember correctly. So, I mean, I'm hoping that, this is not going to start happening here, but we are going to see Primarina switch out here into the Electabuzz. Does not want to take a Dire Claw, but it is, Simon Sneasler is just going to go for that fake out into Pierre Sneasler, and it is going to be a Kowtow to follow up, doing good enough damage to, maybe bring it into that, Terra Dark Sucker Punch range, but now there is the you have to respond, of course.
Yeah, I mean, I think a big thing here is that you were able to get so much chip in the Sneasler, and as we've seen in the mirror before, if you're able to get chip into the Sneaslers in the mirrors, you're able to put on a lot more pressure later on with your King Gambit. Sucker Punch obviously being threatening into the Sneasler now can potentially get rid of it, and you do have a bit more resources to work with if you're on Simon's side. King Gambit switching out here into the Primarina, likely trying to catch a close combat, and also on top of this too, Dire Claw, if it goes for a status here, could be very significant. Could also be a close combat just to get more chip as well.
Could be, and it is just going to be a close combat into the Electabuzz, doing about half damage, so another one should be enough to knock it out. So, yeah, it looks like, I think so far, Simon Sneasler has always been the faster one, and a Dire Claw here with those defense drops, doing a good amount of damage here. The Primarina here now, is threatened by the Dire Claw, but, it could possibly live one and then just go for a Hyper Voice and, possibly just take the Sneasler out and do enough damage to where the Electabuzz just gets knocked out by a Dire Claw. So as long as nothing goes wrong here in terms of maybe crits or sleeps, this is a decent position for Simon. And of course, he still has the Terra option, so he could just go for that Terra Poison, which we might see just now.
Yeah, I feel like I always just tense up a little bit whenever I see Dire Claw coming out, right? Because it's like you never know what it's going to roll. We are going to see the Terra Poison come out here, as I kind of mentioned when we were looking in team preview. It is a very strong option, right? It does allow you to sit in front of the opposing Dire Claw. You're less pressured. Doesn't mean you can't get status, right? It does leave you open to getting put to sleep or being in a situation where you are going to get paralyzed. But I do like the Terra Poison here. You're kind of pressing on your advantage. Close combat is going to come out, but Dire Claw...
Is it going to be asleep?
No sleep. No sleep.
Hasn't happened yet, hasn't and isn't gonna happen here either. Hypervoice gonna be able to take out that Sneasler, and I think at this point it's or both players can be pretty sure that Simon Sneasler is the faster one. Simon might be Jolly, and then Pierre might be running an Adamant set, because if I saw correctly so far, Simon has always been the faster Sneasler.
Yes. I do think that there is definitely some sort of correlation there. It could also be a situation where they're both adamant and Simon has won every speed tie, or even they're both Jolly and that happens too, right? I mean,
only Pierre knows.
Yeah, right. Only Pierre knows. But that definitely is some information that could come into play, especially if they go into game 3, because you might assume oh, I'm always faster, and then the Caesar kind of surprises you. I do think here the Poison Primarina is putting on quite a bit of pressure. You do need to be sure that you're preserving your Sneasler a bit better. Now that you got that advantage by removing the opposing Sneasler on Pierre's side, if you preserve your Sneasler properly, it is a super, super important tool here that you can use.
Yeah, and just goes to show here that, this Primarina, once it is that poison type and, cannot be hit by the Dire Claw super effective anymore, it is just such a dangerous Pokemon. And, it even resists those Moonblasts from the opposing Primarina as well. And Pierre gonna go for a Terra Ghost here on the Electabuzz. So, yeah, okay, this could be tricky for him, not having that Terra on the Primarina himself, since Simon still has the Sneasler here, but it is just going to go for a follow me, so maybe just trying to redirect some Dire Claws or close combats, probably a Dire Claw, but Sneasler not falling for that, just going for a Protect and a Hyper Voice coming for Pierre, hitting both of Simon's Pokemon.
Is Moonblast going to knock out? That's a really big deal here. Moonblast is going to take the Electabuzz down. And with the Electabuzz going down now, you basically use your Terra for nothing, right? You could have preserved it for the Primarina to give it Terra Poison. Then you can Terra Poison Hyper Voice. But now you're pressured by the opposing Dire Claw from Sneasler. So from Simone's side, you're probably very happy to see this because you're able to get rid of the main redirector that is protecting this Primarina. That being said, King Gambit does have Sucker Punch. It is putting on quite a bit of pressure, but you do have 2 fresh Pokemon in the back that you can leverage.
Yeah, exactly. Once you are able to protect that Primarina, maybe, from a Sucker Punch, you might still be able to get a move off. Although we did see Pierre's Primarina go before Simon's, so, if that just goes for Hyper Voice, it's not going to have very a follow. But yeah, Pierre not having this Terra Poison on the Primarina could very well, or is definitely going to be problematic here, if the Dire Claws are going to be super effective. And, the close combats later are also going to hit that King Gambit very, very well.
Yeah, I mean, a big deal here as well. So you'll notice the King Gambit is coming in. Maybe not necessarily, obviously going to be putting too much pressure on the opposing King Gambit or the Prima, but it is probably your most sackable Pokemon, right? It's probably the one that you can get rid of the most and not lose the game. you really need to preserve Sneasler here because Sneasler can pressure Dire Claw into Primarina, can pressure close combat into King Gambit. And I think the position that you're trying to work your Sneasler into is a position where you have Electabuzz next to it. You can safely go for Follow Me and go for an attack. I think Pierre at this point has to try and maybe call out a specific turn of Sneasler playing passive, maybe trying to go for a Swords Dance somewhere here to be able to pressure the Sneasler and the rest of the team.
Yeah, once you get that Swords Dance, you can easily threaten it with a Sucker Punch, but you have to get it first. And, the Simon, I believe, did target down that Primarina because Primarina is not going to need any setup to, take out the Sneasler here. So there is that threat that, Simon has to keep in the back of his head. And if the Primarina goes for a Protect here and the King Gambit sets up a Swords Dance, this game could still look very, very close for both these players. And Primarina is going to go for that Protect. Fake Out going to go in that Primarina. And what are both of these King Gambits going to do right here? Are we going to see any Swords Dances? There is a
Swords Dances come out!
And that is going to be huge for Pierre because now he's threatening the Sneasler, to just take it out before it can move. Shimon also going for a Swords.
Yeah, I can't help but think here that you do have a bit of an advantage with the King Gambit on Pierre's side, right? Like, I don't think the Sucker Punch will be able to knock out the Primarina on Pierre's side. So being able to go for potentially a Moonblast into King Gambit, being able to remove it, go for Sucker Punch into Sneasler, remove it as well. There is quite a dangerous game being played here. As well, too, you have to keep in mind there is the Electabuzz in the back. Maybe if you opt to go for a Protect on the Sneasler and go for an attack with King Gambit, let King Gambit go down and then get in this Electabuzz. It is quite a bit of mind games here. We do have to be very careful in this scenario because there are just so many possibilities, but I feel like there is a safe route that Simone can definitely take to clean out this game. And we are going to see Protectors come out here.
It is going to be a Protect. And a Sucker Punch gonna fail here. Probably, yeah, definitely target on the Sneasler as King Gambit goes for a Sucker Punch on that Primarina. Good damage, but not enough. Moonblast coming out here is gonna be enough to knock out this King Gambit. So now Electabuzz is gonna come in here for Simon. And yeah, this Sneasler is gonna have to do the rest of the damage here, probably. Electro Web, you can use that once the King Gambit.
Yeah, I mean, the thing here is that now with the Follow Me pressure, obviously, it's quite scary because you have a free close combat into the King Gambit, or if you're expecting to Protect, right, then you can opt to go for Dire Claw into the Primarina. It isn't fully over yet, though. There is a mind game here, right? I would almost argue to say it is a bit of a 50-50 here. Do you opt to go for close combat in the King Gambit, calling it not to Protect, and Primarina Hyper Voice, or do you call out that Primarina is going to attack, and like there's just so many different things here. Like Primarina can attack, Primarina can Protect, King Gambit can attack, King Gambit can Protect. We just have to see what they opt to go for here. But it really is a mind gaming situation that I don't know if there's a clear correct answer.
Yeah, I wouldn't see a safe play for either player here as either. Primarina is going to go for the Protect. I did not pay attention to what Simon locked into. He did go for the Follow Me on Electabuzz.
And it's the close combat.
It is a close combat. Simon calls it correctly, takes out that King Gambit, and at this point can easily take out this Primarina and win this match.
Yeah, I mean, it really just came down to that final turn, right? Do you go for a Protect and a Hyper Voice, or do you opt to go for a Protect and a Kowtow Cleave? And we see Simon gets the answer right here, is able to win the game.